The DCEU is coming to an end. As of recording, there's only one property yet to release, and that is Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, which is tentatively scheduled for a December release. Although, as of September, there hasn't been a trailer or any sort of marketing for it yet. Interesting. Anyhow, the DCEU has really had its ups and downs, with many of its works being downs, I'm afraid to say. It all started back in 2013 with Man of Steel, directed by Zack Snyder. It was a gritty, grounded reboot of Superman, and it starred Henry Cavill in the lead role. It was okay. Henry was pretty good as Superman and Clark Kent. He certainly had the look and the physique for it. The film tried to do things a little different too, such as having his identity revealed to Lois before he became a reporter. Overall, it got decent reviews and it performed well, spawning a sequel. Arguably though, Snyder's dark and serious take on Superman was not quite right for the character. There's room for this take, but to me, Superman should be more light-hearted, colourful and hopeful. Snyder never really went there, but like I said, I think there's merit in his depiction, and it's definitely an interesting one. This didn't really start the DCEU though. Initially it was just a standalone film with sequels expected should it succeed. And it did succeed, so they went to work on a Superman sequel. That sequel turned out to be the launch of a cinematic universe with 2016's Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice, again directed by Zack Snyder, and heavily inspired by the Death of Superman and The Dark Knight Returns comic books. Reception was mixed at best. The theatrical version was long and its editing was confusing, with certain plot points and character beats not having enough explanation, if any at all. It was a movie for comic book fans, meaning that if you hadn't read any of the comic books, which are not a part of this universe, then you had no idea what the backstory was for certain moments, events, characters and motivations. It also tried to cram in a lot, with brief introductions for Wonder Woman, Aquaman and The Flash seeming a bit unnecessary and almost distracting. It was almost as if DC was trying to speedily catch up to their rivals' movies at the time. This was also the film that introduced Ben Affleck's Batman to the DCEU. He was pretty good at it too. His Bruce Wayne was moody and angry with a heroic, self-righteous attitude about him. His Batman, while heavily inspired by Frank Miller's depiction, was bulky and imposing, a real threat physically and mentally to Superman and any other foe. It's just a shame that he killed people. Snyder then went out and released an extended cut of the movie which added 30 minutes of footage. It was noticeably better, making the plot and character choices and motivations a lot clearer and more concise. But some of the larger problems, like too many characters, a rush to establish the universe, etc., were still there. Ultimately, the movie has its fans, and I do enjoy it. The fans are also very vocal about liking it. With the mixed reception to Batman v Superman, Warner Bros. Set up a team to form a cohesive story and direction for the DCEU. That didn't last long though, because in 2018, the heads of that team were replaced after a string of unsuccessful movies. Suicide Squad was the next release, coming out in 2016 also. It introduced a bunch of big name stars to the franchise, and it maintained the gritty, grounded look and feel of it. The problem is that the movie was rushed. Writer and director David Ayer wasn't allowed to finish his script, and then once he made the film, he wasn't allowed to edit it. The final release was made by the studio that edited the trailer for the movie, which is a very strange, unusual thing to do. The result, a film that lacked energy, that had a convoluted structure, and while its cast was great, the depiction of certain characters was problematic, and not at all what many DC fans wanted. It performed very well though, garnering an Academy Award nomination for its makeup, but critically, it was panned. Wonder Woman then came out in 2017 from director Patty Jenkins, and it was a big step in the right direction for the franchise. Gal Gadot was great in the titular role. The World War II setting, the themes, the messaging were all very well done. The problem is that its final act fell into generic CGI-filled action territory. What was a great film ended in a very underwhelming, predictable way. Later that year, we finally got the one they should have built up to, Justice League. The story behind this one is infamous. Keeping it short, Zack Snyder was removed from directing the project well into its production. Joss Whedon was brought in to finish it, but he actually reshot most of the movie, took Snyder's action scenes and brisked up the edit a bit. The result, a superhero team-up movie that has little charm or personality, that lacks energy and didn't earn any of its big moments because the prior movies had failed to establish the characters and the world well enough. At this point, certain fans started to outcry for Snyder's version of the movie. Why, you might ask? Well, the trailers for the movie used Snyder's footage, so the fans knew it existed in some form or another. Eventually, when HBO Max came into existence, Snyder was brought back to finish his cut of the movie, filming some new footage as well, editing all of it together, and then he released what is now known as the Snyder Cut. Zack Snyder's Justice League was a 4-hour epic released in 2021, and while it was egregiously long, it was a pretty good film, and far better than the Whedon cut that came out in theatres. Before that though, we got Aquaman and Shazam, two films that are enjoyable and fun in their own unique ways. Aquaman was a throw everything at the wall type of film, with impressive visuals, a charismatic lead, and good, brightly coloured energy throughout. Shazam, meanwhile, was a basic but well done superhero flick, showing that DC could do superhero films if they really tried. We then got Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn in 2020, later retitled just Harley Quinn Birds of Prey. This was sort of a sequel to Suicide Squad, at least for Margot Robbie's popular Harley Quinn. It was a smaller movie, with an older age restriction, a smaller budget, and it did okay. Reviews were mixed, but personally I loved it. This is one of my favourites of them all. I realise I'm in the minority on this one, but the movie had great action, good comedy, fascinating depictions of certain characters, and was overall just a lot of fun. Wonder Woman 1984 came out that Christmas, again directed by Patty Jenkins and starring Gal Gadot. Boy, this one was a problem. A little like Aquaman, this movie went places. It was silly, sometimes fun, with ridiculous moments throughout. It was also a bit of a mess, with dodgy messaging and poor storytelling. I mean, Wonder Woman literally rapes someone in the movie, and yet she's the hero. In 2021, James Gunn jumped from Marvel to DC to write and direct The Suicide Squad, a sequel to Suicide Squad. It was great. DCEU's first truly great film with emotional moments, character-driven storytelling, a fun cast, fantastic action and effects, and great direction. It performed well and it got good reviews. It did so well and Warner Bros really liked it and Gunn so much that they immediately let him do a spin-off TV show called Peacemaker. Peacemaker is thus far the only TV show in the DCEU and will probably always be the only TV show in it. It was also great, focusing on John Cena's Peacemaker and the team behind the Suicide Squad as they try to quell an alien invasion. It's silly, it's funny, vulgar, and what more could you possibly want? A second season was commissioned, but changes in leadership have put it on hold for now. It was time for the hierarchy of power to shift in the DCEU, and Dwayne Johnson really wanted everyone to know that. What he didn't realise is that he and his movie was not responsible for it. Black Adam released in 2022 and it wasn't very good. It was a movie about a villain that tried to make the villain a hero, but failed. It had good visuals and action, and some cool side characters, but it was all just a bit generic and it didn't perform well, critically or commercially. Even the return of Henry Cavill as Superman in Black Adam was not enough to boost it, although it was a small cameo. Around this time, James Gunn was brought on to lead the DCEU into its next steps, alongside producer Peter Safran. In time, we found out what that meant. In short, they're rebooting it, which means that all the projects still in production were in fact the final ones for the DCEU. Henry Cavill's return was also cut short by this because Gunn wanted to reboot that character. Shazam! Fury of the Gods was the first one to come out after this news, and it was really disappointing. It was action heavy, CGI heavy, the comedy rarely worked. Zachary Levi was fine in the lead role, but the movie has little to say and the villains were pretty generic and boring. It did not do well. Earlier this year, we got the highly anticipated The Flash. This one brought back Michael Keaton's Batman, and it featured many surprises from across DC's past and present. It was a big deal, only nobody seemed to care when it actually came out because nobody went to see it. Which is a shame because while it has bad CGI and a messy finale, it's a good, fun film. Even when Warner Bros. Thought they were doing the right thing by giving the fans what they wanted, specifically Michael Keaton, the fans just didn't embrace that. It was odd. Also surrounding this movie were the legal issues of its star, Ezra Miller. Ezra is in many people's eyes a criminal who should have went to prison. The movie got limited marketing and promotion because of this, and while Ezra is said to be working on themselves and bettering themselves, some people might not be willing to support their movie considering their actions. Most recently we got Blue Beetle, which was originally intended to be a HBO Max movie but was given a bigger budget and instead released in cinemas. It was sometimes fun, but very formulaic, with awful villains as well. I didn't do a review of Blue Beetle on my channel because that's literally all there is to say about it. Yes, it's great to see a Latin superhero, and that culture getting mainstream representation is really awesome. But the movie itself was just so generic and formulaic. If you've seen one superhero movie, you've seen Blue Beetle. The Flash and Blue Beetle both suffered this year commercially. I have a separate video on my channel about why that might be, specifically about The Flash. But in short, I just don't think people care anymore, especially when the reboot is on the way and when there are so many other superhero properties to watch and keep up with. One film worth mentioning is Batgirl, which was cancelled when Warner Bros. Was bought by Discovery. The movie, intended for HBO Max, like Blue Beetle, was said to be a mess and not salvageable. It was too small for cinema and too bad for streaming, apparently. So, the movie got scrapped and will never see the light of day for legal reasons. There's another video on my channel all about that too, if you really want more details. And that's it. Later this year we get the final DCEU film Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, as I've already mentioned. Who knows how that will turn out? Like I said, it's only 3 months away and yet we haven't seen a trailer, a poster or anything substantial. All we really know is that the whole Amber Heard controversy surrounding it might have impacted her role in it. And Jason Momoa might be sticking around afterwards. So that's it. The DCEU is over. Almost. In my opinion, the highlights were Birds of Prey, The Suicide Squad, Zack Snyder's Justice League and The Flash. Peacemaker as well. All good in their own ways. The low points were Suicide Squad, Justice League and Black Adam. There is a lot to like about the DCEU, like Henry Cavill, Amy Adams, Gal Gadot, Margot Robbie, Ben Affleck. The grounded, gritty depiction of certain characters and properties was interesting, but ultimately not quite right for many of them. James Gunn is now leading the way, with a new DCU taking the place of the DCEU. It starts with the TV series Creature Commandos, and then the first movie, Superman Legacy, which Gunn is writing and directing. The casting so far and everything I've heard about it sounds almost perfect, so fingers crossed. At the end of the day, it couldn't be any worse than many of the movies that we've already got, but certain fans will no doubt find things to hate, and others will just boycott them, well, just because. If you've liked this video, why not subscribe to my channel for more like it? I've already recommended some of us in this video. And follow me on Twitter and Instagram, or X if you want to call it that, at @the_Grant Burton. Until next time, thanks for watching.